The biggest source of tension within the Russian elites in 2024 was the purge of the Defense Ministry. The Moscow Times media outlet recalls that Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu was moved to a different post, and several dozen officials were detained over the course of many months, including 3 former deputy defense ministers. The shake-up was likely conceived as a way to improve the management of Russia's ballooning military spending. In order to speed up the process of clearing out Shoigu-era placeholders, the Kremlin opted for a method that could be described as rotation through repression. This is not a new approach, but the scale of what occurred at the ministry is unprecedented. The purge has not only redirected rent flows associated with the ministry, but also led to the dismantling of Shoigu's entire clan within the Russian elite. Although Shoigu seems for the moment to be under the personal protection of President Vladimir Putin, he has been powerless to intervene in unfolding events. The Moscow Times says that the easiest way to understand the purge is to look at the criminal cases that followed the first and most high-profile arrest, that of Shoigu's longtime associate, ex-Deputy Defense Minister Timur Ivanov. Each wave of arrests seemed to lead to new arrests in turn, as well as generate new charges against Ivanov himself. After Ivanov's arrest in April 2024, he was charged with the embezzlement of 1.18 billion rubles or $11.5 million. That was followed by the arrest of 2 other senior officials at the Defense Ministry, Yuri Kuznetsov, accused of selling state secrets to contractors linked with Ivanov, and Vladimir Verteletsky, who oversaw spending on digitization. All 3 men maintained their innocence, and Ivanov's lawyer sought to get him moved to house arrest on the basis that Ivanov was subject to Western sanctions, had participated in military action, and been decorated. Ultimately, however, none of that helped. On the contrary, there was another wave of arrests in July arising from the documents seized by investigators in April. This time, the men who ended up behind bars were Andrei Belkov, a military contractor used by Ivanov, and another former deputy defense minister, Dmitry Bulgakov. In turn, the July arrests led to another rash of criminal cases that encompassed construction and military logistics as a whole. As a result of the arrest of Bulgakov, security officers detained the head of military equipment retailer Vontog, Vladimir Pavlov, and several of his business associates. A third wave of arrests in August included the head of the war-themed Patriot Park, Vyacheslav Akhmedov, and yet another former defense minister, Pavel Popovu, was close to Shoigu. Since then, the arrests have spread to numerous institutions connected to the former leadership of the Defense Ministry, varying from Rosgvardia, Russia's National Guard, which is also involved in state defense contracts, to a little-known organization, Oboronles, which manages forests on the territory of military bases and supplies timber to the government of the Moscow region. The Moscow Times recalls that in 8 months of purges, therefore, several major rent flows have been disrupted and charges filed against dozens of officials linked with Shoigu across a whole spectrum of different agencies and organizations. Ivanov is currently implicated in 2 criminal cases, and investigators have hinted there may be more to come. Neither Ivanov nor Popov have sought to cut a deal with investigators. By pushing ahead to seize the 2 men's assets, though, it appears investigators want to pressure them to give evidence against Shoigu himself. When given the green light to these arrests, it's possible Putin didn't expect investigators to take to their task with such enthusiasm. But the rivalries between Russia's security agencies run deep, and the Federal Security Service and the Investigative Committee have accumulated many grudges against the military over the years. Evidently, they've decided to take full advantage of the opportunity, both reanimating old criminal cases and opening new ones.
People on the streets of Kiev on Tuesday were critical of a meeting between top diplomats from Russia and the US, which did not include Ukraine. According to Associated Press, the talks in Saudi Arabia, aimed at improving ties and negotiating an end to the war in Ukraine, represented a rapid and major change in American foreign policy under President Donald Trump. No Ukrainian officials were present at the meeting, which comes as the beleaguered country is slowly but steadily losing ground against more numerous Russian troops in a grinding war that began nearly 3 years ago. President Volodymyr Zelenski said his country won't accept any outcome from this week's talks if Kyiv doesn't take part. European allies have also expressed concerns they are being sidelined. Beyond Ukraine, the meeting, attended by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and other senior officials, had been expected to focus on thawing relations between the two countries, whose ties have fallen to their lowest level in decades. It was meant to pave the way for a meeting between Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. The recent U.S. diplomatic blitz on the war has sent Ukraine and key allies scrambling to ensure a seat at the table, amid concerns that Washington and Moscow could press ahead with a deal that won't be favorable to them. Kyiv's absence at Tuesday's talks has rankled many Ukrainians. A U.S. State Department spokesperson said the meeting was aimed at determining how serious Russia is about wanting peace, and any actual peace negotiations will include Ukraine. Kyiv's participation in such talks was a bedrock of U.S. policy under Trump's predecessor, Joe Biden, whose administration also led international efforts to isolate Russia over the war.
Неприйнятно, да, це неприйнятно для України. Я згодна з нашим президентом, підтримую його наполегливість в тому і напор в тому, щоб, звичайно, Україна була присутня, не те, що присутня, а диктувала свої умови, тому що країна-агресор не може прийти і диктувати свої умови, і тим паче посередники, я дуже вірю в те, що Трамп на нашому боці і він дійсно хоче закінчити війну, але війна повинна закінчитися нашою перемогою, тому що багато людей постраждало, багато людей загинуло, на жаль, і це повинен бути справедливий мир, а без участі України, без нашого голосу і без наших важелів це неможливо.
Ми не є розмінною монетою. Ми якраз той важіль, який виборює зараз місце справедливості у світі. І домовлятися без нас не можна, тому що за рахунок наших людей, наших ресурсів відбувається світова, я вважаю, війна, тому що в неї зараз втягнуті усі країни. І ми дуже вдячні Америці за те, що вона зараз, от як мені здається, почало все зрушуватися з мертвої точки. І завдяки Трампу, хоча він дуже дивна людина, однак викликає дуже сильні почуття. Ми поважаємо його, безумовно. І на сьогоднішній день, я думаю, що дійсно він той, хто може домовитися із Путіним. Але знову ж таки наша країна обов'язково має сказати своє слово, бути присутньою і висувати свої умови.